Good afternoon, and welcome to the Miami-Dade County Black Affairs Advisory Board Village Dialogue, a community discussion on police body-worn cameras. The Black Affairs Advisory Board periodically holds village dialogues aimed at fostering communication and developing strategies to address issues that impact its constituents. This particular dialogue is aimed at addressing the issue of police body-worn cameras and its effect on community policing. Much interest has been generated regarding body cameras, with about 25% of the nation's 17,000 police agencies currently employing them. The recent debates on the necessity and efficacy of police-worn body cameras in response to the need for transparency in law enforcement is critical, and we feel it warrants community input. I'd like to introduce my chair. My name, by the way, is Retha Boone-Fye, and I'm the program officer for the Black Affairs Advisory Board. My chair is Mr. Stephen Hunter Johnson, and he's doing a phenomenal job. He's my boss, so I have to say that. I'd like to make absolutely sure that you people in the audience, as well as those listening, have as much information on this important and critical issue as possible. My chair, Mr. Stephen Hunter Johnson.
All right. I'd like to take a moment to thank Ms. Retha Boone for all of her work in organizing this. When the thought of doing a community forum about police body cameras came forward, it was Ms. Boone who was able to coordinate our use of the Miami-Dade County Commission chambers, as well as having it broadcast on Miami-Dade County television. And for that, we have to be thankful, if only because this is an issue of germane, real public concern. We are here today to discuss what police or to learn rather what police body cameras are, and to discuss how they'll affect the policing within our communities. We have a wonderful and dynamic panel here today. I do want to start by just saying that the real impetus for this particular Village Dialogue came from an opportunity that was presented to the Black Affairs Advisory Board by Chief Dan Oates to attend the Police Executive Research Forum's conference in Washington, D.C., where they actually brought community leaders from throughout the country, over 150 different police forces, their chiefs, and representatives of their community came out, and the police departments were able to speak about what's going on in policing as a career, as an endeavor, and they were able to hear about the concerns of the community from across the country all at once. And body cameras were a subject and a center of the discussion, and we are fortunate to have with us Police Chief Dan Oates, who is, I'm going to say, one of the experts in police body cameras throughout the country. But with all that said, I'm going to turn it over to the past chair of the Miami-Dade Black Affairs Advisory Committee, Advisory Board, Ms. Priscilla Dames Blake, to do our introductions.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you all for joining us today. If you see the back of and inside of your program, we have our mayor and county commissioners here. I'm also so pleased that our vice mayor is here. We have recently included several new members. I'd like to say their names too, please. Brandon Bartley, Cedric McMinn, David McGill, Dominic Dawson, Jashawn Faison, and Richard Nelson. We welcome those new members to our board. Now I'd like to introduce our esteemed panelists, and as they are not in any particular order here other than Chief Oates, if you would just raise your hand or nod your head when I say your name so there will be some recognition. First we have Daphne Campbell, who is the Democratic member of the Florida House of Representatives, representing the 108th District, which includes Miami and North Miami in northern Miami-Dade County since 2010. She is a member of several legislative committees, including the Joint Legislative Auditing Committee, Local and Federal Affairs, Local Government Affairs Subcommittee, Ranking Minority Member, Rulemaking Oversight and Repeal Subcommittee, Veteran and Military Affairs Subcommittee, and additionally, she is a member of the Citizens Coalition for Public Schools, Democratic Black Caucus of Florida, the Miami-Dade County Legislative Delegation, as well as a former member of the Criminal Justice Subcommittee and the Veteran and Military Affairs Subcommittee. You are busy. I am busy. Chief Daniel J. Oates. He was appointed as the 19th Chief of the Miami Beach Police Department on June 9, 2014. Prior to his appointment in Miami Beach, Chief Oates served for nearly 9 years as the Chief of Police for the city of Aurora, Colorado, and prior to that appointment, he served for 4 years as Chief of Police and Safety Services Administrator for the city of Ann Arbor, Michigan. From 1980 through 2001, Chief Oates served in the New York Police Department. He finished his New York Police Department career as a deputy chief and the executive officer and second in command of the Brooklyn South Patrol Bureau. Chief Oates is a member of numerous professional associations and a member of the board of directors of the Police Executive Research Forum. The International Association of Chiefs of Police, Chief Oates also serves as the Criminal Intelligence Coordinating Council, the National Advisory Council of Police Chiefs and Sheriffs, created in May 2004, to advise the U.S. Attorney General and Secretary of Homeland Security on intelligence and security strategies in a post-9/11 world. We're so glad to have you here in Miami-Dade County. Deputy Director Juan Perez. Juan Perez has dedicated the past 25 years to the law enforcement profession. He joined the Miami-Dade Police Department in 1990 and has been promoted through all civil service ranks. February 4, 2013, Juan Perez was appointed Deputy Director. In this capacity, he is responsible for implementing policy, practices, procedures, and strategies to improve the overall effectiveness and responsiveness of the department, the 8th largest law enforcement agency in the southeastern United States, serving 2.6 million residents. Deputy Director Perez oversees the activities of 2 major sections: investigative and police services, as well as the activities of the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, the Miami-Dade Public Safety Training Institute, and the Strategic Planning and Development section. Besides his law enforcement career, Deputy Director Perez is actively involved with the Police Officer Assistance Trust, a nonprofit support organization since 2009. This serves the law enforcement community of Miami-Dade County and currently serves as its president. Dr. Walter Richardson. Dr. Walter Richardson is widely known for having served for 26 years as the senior pastor at Sweet Home Missionary Baptist Church in Perrine, Florida. Sweet Home is 1983 was a small community of faith with approximately 125 members who met for worship twice a month and grew to become a mega church with multiple services each Sunday. Dr. Richardson currently serves as the adjunct professor of religion at St. Thomas University, where he teaches world religions. He teaches Judaism, Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism, and is called upon frequently to speak on the various religions' expressions of faith. Dr. Richardson is also the senior chaplain for the Miami-Dade Police Department and currently chair of the Miami-Dade County Community Relations Board. He says, is my friend Priscilla Dames here? Hello, Dr. Richardson. How are you today? We go way back. He used to say he raised me, but I don't think he wants to say that anymore since I'm old as dirt now. Attorney Renee Gordon. I must say she is also a past member of our board. Renee Gordon is a candidate for Circuit Court Judge in Miami-Dade County's 11th Judicial Circuit with more than 20 years of legal experience. She has litigated civil and criminal cases in circuit and county courts and currently works as a senior attorney with the Miami-Dade Public Defender's Office. Attorney Gordon has been a member of the Florida Bar for more than 20 years and currently serves as the Florida Bar Juvenile Rules Committee. She is a member of Florida Association of Women's Lawyers, the Gwen S. Cherry Black Women's Lawyers Association, and the Wilkie D. Ferguson Bar Association. She is a participant in Catalyst Miami, a nonprofit organization established to identify and launch innovative community-built strategies, and also serves on the Neighborhood Accountability Board and is an active member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Renee assisted the Department of Juvenile Justice in developing and implementing its Quality Assurance Program. As a result of this program, standards were created to improve the conditions and outcome for all of Florida's children. Thank you for being here, Renee. Okay. If Mr. Crespo does join us, we will read his bio a little later. Student Minister Patrick Mohammed. Student Minister Patrick Mohammed, originally in charge of the mosque in Phoenix, Arizona, was named Student Minister for the Nation of Islam's Mosque number 29, located in Miami, and has been serving in this capacity for the past year. Just like his predecessors, he is helping the mosque and the community to prosper. His most recent endeavor was to bring the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan to speak at the Mount Zion Baptist Church in Overtown, and we thank him for that. Miami Mosque number 29 student minister and Haitian representative Patrick Mohammed grew up in Haiti and speaks English, French, and Creole. He welcomes the opportunity to serve in Miami, one of the nation's most diverse cities. I thank you again for being here and thank all of our panelists. Chair?
Absolutely. And thank you very much, Ms. Dames. We tried to put together a very diverse panel today because we wanted to talk about this issue and we wanted this issue to be discussed critically. And I think that was the most important thing. To that end, what is the issue we're discussing? Today, we're here to discuss the use by police departments of police body cameras. I'd like to then start with Chief Oates and Director Perez and learn more about exactly what this term means and how is it used in policing. Chief Oates? Hit your button.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I brought today, and it's available to the audience, copies of the Police Department, Miami Beach Police Department's policy. And if you take one look at this document, it's 8 pages long. You'll see how complex it is to roll this technology out in modern American policing and all the things that the department had to consider. It is not as simple as one might think that you just put a camera on a cop and suddenly everything is clear and everything's captured perfectly. One of the things I've said in a number of forums is we have grown up as Americans watching television and movies where directors make sure that every shot shows exactly what the director wants you to see. The sound is perfect. The images are generally excellent if that's what the director wants you to see. And you make a judgment as to what's occurring in this fictionalized version of an event based on perfect video and audio. In fact, these cameras are not perfect. They capture only what they're pointed out, and they capture only what sound that they're capable of capturing. They're very, very good. The technology these days is getting better all the time. They're small. I neglected to bring one with me today, but essentially they're about the size of a little larger than the old pagers we used to carry around 15, 20 years ago. They're relatively inexpensive. I think you can purchase them now for $400 or $500, which is not a lot of money for a one-time investment for a police officer. However, body camera programs are tremendously complex and expensive. The reason is all that digital video has to be stored somewhere. And eventually people make demands of it. The courts, defense attorneys, prosecutors want to see that video. And the public eventually wants to see it, and we are in a very open public records state. That storage and retrieval can be very, very expensive for taxpayers. The police department in Miami Beach contemplates somewhere in the neighborhood of eventually 280 cameras being on the street, and our cost in the first 5 years is around $3.5–4 million. Okay? So you can imagine, when my colleague Juan Perez speaks for the county, what his costs will eventually be if he's going to put cameras on every officer, and the taxpayers have to bear that cost. And that isn't even considering, because we don't know yet what the consequences are going to be to the taxpayers of Miami Beach for all the staff that is going to have to be hired to produce these videos in response to court demands and public records requests. Because often every video is going to have to be viewed by someone before it can be released. For instance, something as simple as redacting the identity of juveniles on a video. Now, in our business, you can imagine on the most important events, more than one officer is going to show up. So if you had a major event, you could have 6 or 8 officers show up with cameras. The cameras are on. Say all of them are there for an hour on scene or half an hour. You can multiply how many hours of videotape now exists somewhere and is potentially subject to demand. Okay? Another thing that we get in the police departments all the time is records requests from lawyers in litigation. So today we might get a request, someone who is an attorney for an issue in a civil matter involving the safety of Alton Road in Miami Beach. We might get a records demand for 2 years worth of all accident reports. All right? Now, tomorrow, 2 years from now, if cops are wearing cameras with great frequency, my police department could get a demand for all the concomitant accompanying video connected with police investigations of those accident reports. So there's the potential here that this could overwhelm us. In Washington State, which is a little bit ahead of Florida in terms of use of body cameras and has an equally, if not more liberal public records law, there are police departments that have literally shut down their body camera programs because they can't afford to maintain them because of these kinds of demands. In terms of managing a program, here are the issues which I'll go through briefly, and I'm sure Juan is going to cover some of the same, or you can supplement this. The policy issues for us are when to turn the cameras on and off, okay, who gets access to the recordings, and when they're made available to the public, and how you manage all that. Hence, there's an 8-page policy that folks have available to them. There's some big decisions in there. There's a great debate. This is new technology for our profession. There's a great debate in our profession right now among police leaders as to when to turn the camera on and off, okay? We all know in the current climate how important trust between a police department and a community is. How is that level of trust, or the trust you want to achieve, impacted by the fact that the interaction between your regular, ordinary street cop and the people that he's dealing with, or she is dealing with, are recorded? All right? How do we feel as citizens having every interaction with a police officer recorded? I can tell you in Miami Beach, if you run into an officer who's wearing a camera, it will be recorded because that is my instruction. I've gone in the direction of, if you have a camera, you turn it on at the beginning of police-citizen interaction, and you turn it off only when that interaction is over, okay? Other police departments are making exceptions and giving police officers discretion when dealing with certain kinds of circumstances. For instance, dealing with a crime victim or a witness to a crime. Because crime victims and witnesses are often very, very worried about what's disclosed about them. For the time being, during our pilot program, I've chose to tell the officers a bright line rule, you turn the camera on, okay? There's a debate in our profession whether or not to make exceptions for certain circumstances. So, for instance, if a police officer is interviewing a sexual assault victim and in Miami Beach and he has a camera and she asks that the camera be turned off, the officer's going to politely say, I'm sorry, our policy is to leave the camera on. We may change that policy over time based on feedback and input, but for now, I've taken that approach. Other police chiefs and other departments have gone the other way and said, turn the camera off at the request of a victim. So that's one significant issue. And maybe I should let other people speak, but there are a series of cascading issues around when the camera's turned on and off and who's given access to them. So I hope that helps as sort of opening the discussion, Stephen.
Yeah, and Director Perez, just to the extent that we can understand to what extent body cameras have been deployed within the Miami-Dade County Police Department?
Well, good afternoon. Well, first, back in February of 2013 or March of 2013, we started exploring body cameras. First, we started with the dash cams, which is a very pricey, costly venture for us because we're such a large agency, and to install a camera in a car is about $6,000 to $7,000 per vehicle, and then if it crashes or breaks down, you lose that camera. So we looked at into the body cameras, which is a more feasible practice for us. We did run a pilot program back in 2013 with the body cameras, and with great success. So since then, we've been in the mode of procuring it. Right now, we're in the cone of silence, but I will tell you we are moving forward with body cameras, and I'm hopeful that by summer of next year, most of our patrol officers will have body cameras deployed. So that's where we're at with the body cameras. Chief Oates spoke in length of many of the concerns that we have with body cameras. I mean, we study pretty much the same things that he mentioned. PERF and IACP policies, and PERF did a great study on body cameras, which we also use as a model to develop our policies. We've shared our draft policy with Miami Beach, with the state attorney. We also went to the ACLU and provided them a copy so that they can provide some feedbacks, and we're in the process of that discussion now with the ACLU. We've also provided it to the public defenders because we want the policy to be a holistic policy. Everybody has all these stakeholders have something to get their input and buy-in. We also created our policy with the police union. We sat with them for 4 sessions of multiple hours each session so that they have input, so that the officers get buy-in, so it's a best practice type policy. One of the issues that we were having with the policies when we were developing was that the state of Florida really didn't have any laws in place, any legislation, but since then there's been some put in there which dictate when an agency has to, or when certain video is exempt from being released. And that was important because at first there was no exception. So if you go into somebody's residence, somebody called the police on purpose, now it's recorded, it would become public record, and their neighbor that called the police for the heck of it can get a copy of it and see and put it on YouTube. So there's some state laws that prevent that now, and in addition, this year there's some legislation in which we're asking for as well to protect the body camera so that it's exempt from Statute 934, which is the two-party consent. We can record people and videotape people during a criminal investigation, but a traffic stop isn't a criminal investigation. So right now we're trying to close that loophole, so anything that's captured on a body camera that's not in a criminal investigation, we can capture it legally, and take care of that. So.
And to that point, and it's an interesting segue, Representative Campbell, it's our understanding that you're sponsoring legislation regarding officer body cameras. Would you be as kind as to to educate us on exactly what's going on and what your office is doing?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I respond to your questions, how many body cameras you planning to start throughout Miami-Dade County?
Well, we budgeted for body cameras 2 years ago and last year as well, so we put $1 million and $1 million, so we have, and then we also put in for a grant. So we're going to purchase over the next probably year 1,500 body cameras, which will cover all of our patrol officers, airport, port officers, and those that are in the uniform capacity in the cities that we cover.
So,
And if I could, I'll just summarize where Miami Beach is. We have about 60 cameras on the street. We started our program in May, and we are gradually adding cameras, and our goal eventually is to have about 270, 280 cameras on the street, and that would be pretty much everyone who wears a uniform and does any kind of uniform function in Miami Beach. And we hope to accomplish that by the end of 2017.
follow up, Mr. Chair. So, you telling me you're gonna start, how many you said? How many you gonna start?
We're going to start with 500,
500?
and then at second 500, it will be phase 2, up to 1,500. So we have 3 rounds of 500 cameras is what we're asking for.
So are you guys gonna divide it in cities or just, Miami-Dade County?
That's just for Miami-Dade County Police.
Police
Yeah.
only? Oh, okay. Well, let me say good evening to all. We have a bill in Tallahassee, HB 93, for law enforcement officers body cameras. The bill was there last year and it failed because we have early session, and we have it again this year with Representative Jones. So I'm the co-sponsor of the bill, and truly the bill right now is in appropriation committee. It went through only one committee, and I think it went to 2 committees and only 1 left. But in the Senate, it's not moving at all. So the reason we bring this bill, and I think it's very important, because in Tallahassee, we have good policy. And we try to put good policies in place. Because once we pass a bill and it turns to law, we don't want later on it affecting anyone. So this is why we reach out to all officers throughout the state. We reach out to, state troopers, everybody in general, to ask them to give us input to make sure we put this in place. If you notice, it's been almost 2 to 3 years. The image of officers are terrible, terrible, terrible. So, and we don't want that, because if we fighting in Tallahassee to make sure we bring dollars for officers, to do, their daily going every day, to use it to do good things. And you tell me, and who's paying for it? Our own color, which is black kids or black, people in general. And it happens every day. We hear it every day. It's every corner. So this is why what I'm asking the audience who's sitting here to take notes, to please go to Tallahassee and lobby this bill, HB 93, because we have to pass this bill this year, and the bill have to turn to law, because we have several states. I don't know if everybody got a little booklet I pass around. The bill is there. On the back of it, it has several states already who already have body cameras in place. So as the officer just said, they start using it already, but we want everyone to use it, because if they don't have nothing on them, and whatever report they give, that's what goes. And I think it's unfair and injustice, and I love officers, and I could tell them, I was sharing with them last 2013, I passed a bill in Tallahassee for law enforcement Hall of Fame. So basically, if we're fighting for the officers, we just want you guys to do the right thing, to be accountable once any injustice happens. So I commended both of you, the director and the chief from Miami Beach, who started already, and I'm hoping this bill go through this year. And you guys have to lobby hard and make sure Governor Scott signed this bill, and at least these officers could be accountable for their action.
And with that said, Attorney Gordon, are you aware of what the public defender's position is on the use of body cameras, and in particular, if you can educate us on some of the legal issues. I know that Chief Oates mentioned a couple, and whether or not the Public Defender's Office has any position on that as well.
Well, first, let me just say I'm glad to be here today, and I'm glad to see the people in the audience today. I concur with the Attorney General Loretta Lynch that body cameras do hold tremendous promise for advancing transparency, promoting accountability, and advancing public safety for law enforcement officers as well as the community. I affectionately call it TAP, transparency, accountability, and public safety. So we are excited about the use of body cameras. We understand that there are some concerns like privacy. And there is another concern, and I believe that that concern is more around who controls and owns the footage of the body camera. And in most cases, I know with the Miami-Dade Police Department, as well as the Miami Beach Police Department, sole property of the BCW body camera is used and is the sole property of each department. And of course, there are some concerns with that. There have been some, and I'm not saying that the Public Defender's Office is advocating this, but there have been some concerns that a third-party administrator may want to have access because they feel that if you control the usage, it is your sole property, that somehow the public may not be as, or feel as though that, it is really, really open. There are some who have considered it's like the fox guarding the hen house. And so that is one of the issues, who controls it, who owns it. And of course, though, there are some good things about, certainly some really, really good things about why it is good for police officers. One is it gives them the ability to document and review data for their own reporting purposes. It can be used as a training tool for the officers, and that's good. And it can also enhance officer safety. But once again, one of the things that I would like to see as I look at the standards of operating procedures, I did not see the word transparency. I did see mostly, for officers' safety, enhanced law enforcement ability to document. With that being said, officers definitely need to be trained, and I think that's going to be really critical in the use of body cameras. Because if I'm correct, this body camera is operating as a push button, and is that correct? It's push button to record?
Yes, the current methodology is I'm sorry. The answer is yes. The current methodology is you have a simple way to turn the camera on by pushing a button. And for obvious reasons, you want it to be a real simple action for the officer's safety so it becomes muscle reflex and he doesn't have to think about it in a moment of crisis where his safety is at issue.
And with given that, the training, what needs to be in place, and what happens, which I think is really critical when you have a situation where if you had a third party overseeing it and there was some glitch, the public wouldn't be so quick to think that this glitch that happens with technology, and we know it does, was somehow attributed to the officer not wanting information to be seen.
And let me, Representative Campbell, before I get to your comment, let me just ask, because I know that Student Minister Muhammad spends much of his time ministering in some of the most crime-affected areas of our community, and with some of those victims, and I'll be honest enough and man enough to say perpetrators of some of those crimes, so he may be more in touch with what the community is thinking when we're talking about police body cameras. So with that said, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Minister. I'm going to come right back around that.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Greetings to all in the name of Allah God, the Beneficent, the Merciful. As a student representative of the Honorable Minister Farrakhan, the Nation of Islam, and beginning with a scriptural reference, is that in the book of Proverbs, you talk about how justice is the principle of fair dealing. We have been working in the Liberty City area and throughout the communities, in particular amongst so-called gangs and also relation with certain police officers. Currently, as that is our primary focus to work in the communities, there is a great gap of trust. And the gap of trust is that we're finding ourselves fighting a war on two fronts. One, we do also have black-on-black crime, which even when those who commit those crimes, they do not feel the trust to so-called, they call it snitch or report. And they have said to us, how can we report it or report it to police officers who we don't trust as well? So the problem that we're seeing here is that I'm sure that there are some good officers, but we are running into rogue cops. And that seems to be the problem. And so we hear a lot of the training, and to make a reference of what we're hearing from the community, they're asking the question, even when it is said to be trained, even it says that a camera that they'll have possessed, how can we trust the mindset that will actually turn on that camera? And like Representative Gordon was saying, who controls it? And so the trust or the distrust is increasing in the community. And we do have some, if you could say, skepticism. We can be optimistic about certain things and pessimists about certain things, but right now is a lot of pessimist idea that there is no trust factor because of in light of what's been happening lately. And lastly, to say something that we heard from the community as it was leaked out, that there were certain police officers who were training on target practice, and they had black youth and black young men, and they were targeting on them. So once that got into the news, that adds into the factor. So right now, the main thing is the level of distrust between the community and law enforcement officers. Thank you.
Representative Campbell, you had a question?
Yes. I'm going to piggyback on, on both of them at the same time. I'm piggyback on Ms. Gordon, and I'm going to piggyback on Patrick. Let me talk to the two officers at the same time. What procedures should law enforcement follow if a camera fails to properly operate at the beginning or during the officer's shift? Can any one of you answer that? What procedures?
You want to tell her what you have in place?
You have it in place.
Again, as I had discussed earlier, I made the decision that officers will turn the camera on at the beginning of a police interaction with a citizen. Therefore, if they do not turn the camera on, they have violated our rules, okay? And we have processes in place to discipline officers who don't follow the rules. There are a handful of vendors. One can't talk about different vendors because Miami-Dade County has a cone of silence and they're in a bid process. But there are a handful of national vendors. They all have good equipment, and it's with complete audit trails, and you're completely capable of determining, where the camera was and whether or not it was turned on or not. So the bottom line is, if you have to have absolutely clear policies on when to turn the camera on and off. Now, the bill, Representative, that you are sponsoring, I have read, and it's a very smart bill that says police departments will cover these issues and will have these policies. And I think the bill, as it's written, it's important that it passes. You can't just put cameras on the street without doing smart thinking about how to handle them. With regard to the issue of the video, probably the law enforcement leadership in this state is going to have a huge problem with the suggestion by the defense that these videos be turned over to a third party, and the reason is the videos are evidence. The way our criminal justice system is structured is the police and the state attorneys control the release of evidence pursuant to existing law and criminal discovery statutes. So any video that is evidence of a crime or investigation, surely the criminal justice system is the folks on our side, the prosecution, are going to insist that that evidence be controlled under all the same rules. So I don't know where that debate is going to go. That's a relatively new issue with regard to body cameras, is this notion of third-party control. The way our vendor, and as I understand it, the other vendors work, is we bought a service. We didn't just buy cameras. We bought a storage service and an evidence system whereby the officers and the supervisors catalog the evidence depending on the nature of the event. In fact, that's the hardest part of the training, is teaching the officers to use the software properly so that when they take a video and it's a traffic accident or an arrest, they categorize it correctly in our system so that it can be most easily produced for evidence. But the bottom line is all these current systems, it's stored by the vendor. It can't be altered or tampered with in any way. But on that issue, that'll be an interesting public policy debate, and there are going to be a lot of these kinds of discussions over the years ahead as this technology is integrated into American policing. But I can't imagine that law enforcement or prosecutors are going to agree to let evidence, this particular kind of evidence, be handed over to third parties when nowhere in the criminal justice system we do that for any other evidence. So.
With that said, and I think that highlights, that one issue highlights exactly what the purpose of this particular meeting is. In the wake of the tragedies both in Ferguson, Missouri, Baltimore, around the country, I mean, just the ones they tell us on TV aren't the only ones that happen, even here and locally. The thought was, if they all had body cameras, we'd all be okay. But nobody knows, or we haven't really discussed, what that truly and really means. Both for the community, the question about who's storing it, who gets to see it, and for the officers. I know for a fact, and I'd love to hear Director Perez's input on this, that it can be sometimes very difficult to properly discipline or even get rid of a bad egg officer because you don't necessarily have the evidence. And so the question becomes, and you mentioned interacting with the unions on this, and the unions are one of the reasons why that is such an issue. It's a very powerful lobby and group. I'm sure Representative Campbell knows firsthand how strong that can be. How that affects officer discipline, because I think what we heard from Student Minister Muhammad was very specifically that there's a distrust amongst the community. And so is the hope that we'll be able to increase or deploy these also for cases of officer discipline?
Well, when it comes to the first and foremost, I think I heard somebody mention something about when somebody doesn't turn on the camera on purpose, right? A faulty camera, we'll be able to tell if it really, if it's not working properly or so forth, we'll be able to tell. But our policies, obviously after the training, review of policy and deployment of the cameras, our policy has in place, our draft policy has in place that, these steps and when you're going to record and when you're going to shut down the cameras, just like the Miami Beach policy. So in order for the policy to be a policy, to have bite, we have to have discipline if they don't obey. And that's the bottom line. I mean, the officers have to go out there and record when they're supposed to record. Right now, if they don't record an incident, what they're going to have to do is report it immediately to a supervisor and write a memo up to the major. Why? Because if there was an excuse, I didn't have time to turn it off, whatever, at least we have it documented. Because if there's a certain pattern that's demonstrated by the officer, then we're going to have to take action on that. As far as complaints that come in, our agency had last year, we did 54,000 plus traffic stops, 36,000 arrests, and countless, interviews of individuals and the calls for service and everything else. When you somewhere in the neighborhood between 900,000 to 1 million contacts in a year. Out of that, we had, I think the number last year was, and we're running about the same pace as this year, 135 IA complaints, internal affairs complaints, that there were people alleging misbehavior by officers and so forth. So a very small percentage. So now when we get those type of complaints, or if it's a discourtesy type complaint, we will be able to go into the video and review it. In fact, one of the things we'll probably have to do is change the way we do our complaints, because we may be able to do it faster. We may be able to make some adjustments to our process so it's immediate at the district level right there and then. It's because we have, if it's captured on video, so that we can address the officers right there, so that we can issue discipline if we have to issue discipline, or just corrective action, the training, all that will be expeditious. And the body cameras will help us through that process for that transparency. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Perez, what are the consequences if an officer for violating, written body cameras policies?
Well, we have, our department has, and pretty much the whole county has a progressive discipline level, a policy. So there's steps that are taken. So right now, we're not there yet. But once we start, we can go from anywhere from an informal counseling to a formal counseling where it gets documented, to a disciplinary action report, which will be a written reprimand. We have suspensions in place all the way up to termination. So we have multiple levels. So depending on the severity of what occurred, or the number of times that the incident happens, we take all that into account. And we have a department discipline coordinator who gives us the level, so that so it's consistent across the board, what levels of discipline for this type of behavior. So this will be all part of that process.
I'm going to take a moment to ask and shift the questioning just a little bit, if only because Minister Muhammad mentioned a distrust within the community, a divide, as it were, between the police and the community at large. And Dr. Richardson, we're fortunate enough to have you both in your role as elder statesman amongst Miamians here. You know this town. You know this town on a social level, as well as your role as chairman of the Community Relations Board. Is that divide there? Has it ever been any worse? And will this help?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I applaud you and the Black Affairs Advisory Board and Ms. Retha Boone for convening this, because part of our responsibility as the Community Relations Board is to make sure that good information gets out about all the various issues that broach our community. This is one of those issues. We went through this with when tasers first came out. We had some wonderful discussions around the county, and I think with the information, people were informed, better informed, and I think with the proper information, readied themselves for what was to be and what continues to be the state of affairs as they are now and will continue to be. That being said, I think body cameras are here to stay. And as I hear the comments, my conclusion is that this is a work in progress. We don't have it right altogether yet, but I think it is a work in progress. And our law enforcement committee, our law enforcement and criminal justice committee, took this issue on over a year ago and talked to Chief Oates, and also with the Miami-Dade Police Department director at that time, and we completely endorsed the program. Philosophically, it's the way to go. With respect to your query about whether this is the right time for this, the temperature of our community, I think times demand that we have this kind of accountability from law enforcement so that we can facilitate conversations between those that are the community and those that are involved in law enforcement. I think things are better. They're not. We definitely don't have a panacea now. We definitely don't have the way things will be. This is not utopia, but I think we're on our way because I see more systems being put in place for accountability. I've been involved in law enforcement as a chaplain for 26 years. Was involved before then on the other end as a community advocate. And there was a time when what happened in that blue uniform stayed with the people in the blue uniform, didn't get out. Community had to guess at what was going on, and many times came to wrong conclusions. Many times they came to right conclusions, but there was no transparency. I heard that word used earlier. I think we're getting to a point now where we're going to see and experience more transparency with body cameras and similar implements used by law enforcement. And so I think, to Brother Muhammad's point, I think we'll see some trust building. I don't think we're there yet, but I think we're well on our way. I happen to serve currently in South Dade, and I would tell you that for the few times we've had the police come forth and admit with documentation, with evidence that they've made some mistakes, I think that's facilitated evidence. Evidence of the fact that we're trying to become more transparent and more accountable to the public. The whole idea of community policing was supposed to help that whole that arena of mistrust. When you have people representing the people who look like the people, and so I think we're on our way. And the Community Relations Board has been in support of this since its inception, and I see no reason for us to pull back from that now. Because I think, again, it's not being too redundant, it's a work in progress, and I think we're getting it right. I think we're getting it right. Long response to a short question.
But a deep question. Chief Oates?
If I could follow up with a couple of comments. It was about 15 years ago that tasers hit the streets in America. It has taken many, many years for American law enforcement to refine what is considered best practices and proper use of that equipment. And I think we're in the same place with body cameras. I think we'll be at this for years, refining what is thought to be best practices with regard to these cameras and all the issues. I'm talking 5 to 10 years in American policing before we finally get this right, and there are generally accepted practices and expectations for a community. I will tell you this, I don't see how the introduction of body cameras can be anything but on the whole good. And I'll tell a story. One of my very active beat officers on one of our commercial strips, 41st Street, I had a conversation with him last week. Now, we give our officers the choice to either tell people the camera is on or not. And he tells me, he turns it on, he tells everybody he deals with, I'm filming this interaction. And he has noticed a marked change in how people react to him. Generally, everyone is well behaved because they know they're on film. Now, obviously, that translates to the officers. And one of the real byproducts of putting these cameras on the street is that officers are going to know that all their actions are filmed. And to the extent we have officers, some who are not the best behaved in their citizen interactions, they're going to have to behave better in order to keep their jobs because we're going to have everything on film. So it can only, on the whole, be a good thing. Two other issues. One is the business of policing, the business of using force to arrest people and those kinds of things can occasionally be very ugly. And again, I get back to the point I made in the original presentation. When we watch sanitized versions of use of force in police dramas and that kind of stuff, the movie makers make it all look so easy to take someone into handcuffs and that kind of stuff. There are elements that of our business that are tough and tough to watch. As an example, okay, most modern police departments have trained dogs that do, among other things, apprehension. I don't know how, when the time comes, when we start seeing videos of a dog apprehending a bad guy, a suspect, that is ever going to look good to anyone, okay? But our society is changing in that more and more we're going to see that kind of transparency, and we're going to see those videos. And we'll be making judgments about the officer, about the dog, about the interaction, could it have been avoided? We're going to be seeing more and more of that kind of conversation in the days and the years ahead, because our business is going to become more transparent. And I think the American public is going to learn a lot more about our business. And then one final point. The events in Chicago, okay? The authorities in Chicago took 15 months to release that video. And we all know what Chicago is going through as a result of that decision. There's another issue here in Florida, and that is this. There is a statute today that prohibits the police and the state attorney for releasing video leading up to and the moment involving the death of a person. So if an event like that were to occur anywhere here in Florida, and there was a clamoring for the release of the video, today, the police department and the state attorney couldn't release the video because of state law. That is eventually an issue that's going to have to be tackled by somebody, and eventually is going to have to be tackled by the legislature. Because I guarantee you, every decision maker in Chicago today regrets the fact that that video wasn't released for 15 months. So that's outstanding. Yet another important issue that, with the evolution of this technology, is going to have to be addressed.
Thank you. And I can't resist, because we happen to have a state representative here to perhaps take up that particular issue, and that is, as Chief Oates mentioned, we've got a statute that prevents the release of certain things, and that is a statute on the books. So we could, in theory, based on what I'm hearing, have a Chicago-like situation, which we know is only going to increase the divide and the distrust, where there is a shooting with the police body camera, and the community still doesn't learn anything for 15 months, 24 months.
That is unacceptable.
So I'm not going to put you on the spot, but we're going to be watching out in Tallahassee to see if we can get some changes on that.
This is why I just said earlier, we want everyone to participate, to lobby in Tallahassee. Send email, use the social media, send email, send mail, send, like from Twitter, Facebook, now I hear they have a Snapchat, they have another one again. So it's so many of them, so we use them to make sure this bill heard both sides. Because if the bill heard in the House and failed in the Senate, it's a failure again this year. But if we lobby the bill and from both sides and we bring it to Governor Scott, I know for sure he will sign it to law. Because if you notice, the situation with police officers in our community is our own kids, most of the time. Our own. It's no others than our own. I'm sorry, officers, to put you on the spot, but most of the time, it's black kids. And I could tell you what happened a few months ago in North Miami Beach, where I have a few friends who live in that area, and two boys, at 12 noon came from school, not from school, from work. And their ages like 20, 19. They didn't have nothing in their hands. They took a bus from work, going home, live in that area for 10, 15, 16 years. And the police, two white police, stopped them and searched them. So I reach out to them, but they fix it. So what I'm saying, we have to stop a lot of things going on in the Black Liberty City. I represent Liberty City. It's every day something happened there. I know they said it's a bad area, but at the same token, it's a lot of targets, police officers in that area as well. I met an officer, Director Perez, who told me anyone, I'm not mentioning the name, he said anyone he saw in Liberty City, as long as you're driving a very nice car, they will stop you regardless because the area is bad. So basically, everybody. So I said, everybody's going to get involved in the situation. So I told them I would never drive there, but I have to. I represent Liberty City. So if you tell me you don't know who I am, because I'm driving in Liberty City in a nice car, convertible Mustang. Oh no, Representative Campbell cannot drive that, so I'm going to stop her and search her. So this is what's going on. So if they have the body cameras, I know for sure they're going to decrease, all the situation and put some trust in the community, because the community is losing all their trust on police officers. They don't respect. Don't you see what happened the other day? I was watching one who was fighting, in at the DMV with the police officers, because they don't respect police officers no more. They don't trust them, and they should be respected, because they are there for us to watch over us, to make sure we are safe where we live. So we have to have respect for them. But if something like that happening, where we're missing distrust and the gaps between officers and the community, it's a problem. So we have to fix it. Please, audience, come to Tallahassee, lobby us. Don't leave one, or if the Representative Campbell only. It's 120 state representatives and 40 senators. You have to lobby all of them. And you have to lobby the president of the Senate, Andy Gardner, and you have to lobby the Speaker of the House, Christopher Lee, as well. So you have to do a big lobby, even Governor Scott, to make sure once the bill passes both sides, he didn't veto the bill, because Governor Scott loves to veto everything. You guys know that. So please,
And now let me say, I'll be fair and honest enough to say that you can't have a more vocal state representative than State Representative Campbell lead that charge. We're also so fortunate to have a woman on the dais who is a conflict resolution specialist, an expert. And it sounds like to me, Ms. Dames, that there is a conflict between the police and the community. I'd be very interested, and I think we'd all be better off having heard your thoughts on this matter.
I think the reason that our chairperson is calling on me is because I'm getting more and more fidgety as I sit here, because I had not planned to say anything. I am old as dirt. I've been on this board forever. Barbara, Carrie Schuler, Dr. and Atherley Range, that tells you. Put me on this board. I'm not as diplomatic as our present chair. I'm a mother and I am tired. I was out there marching when everybody else, it seems like, in the country had stopped marching, but Miami was still marching. So I was marching, and then 1,000 years ago, and then I found myself marching again because of Ferguson. I went to Sanford about Trayvon Martin, but Ferguson was just a minute ago, and I looked around and I said, Priscilla, why are you out here marching? You're too old to march. There was a lot of young people there. I was proud of them. But it's hard to change who I am. Reverend Richardson, Dr. Reverend Richardson, who I admire and respect so much, he's much more diplomatic than I, too. We have knocked heads over the years many times. We don't have 15 years. You said it took 15 years with the tasers, and we had some of the same issues. And then our chief kind of piggybacked on that and said it is getting better. It's going to take about the same amount of time. We can't afford to wait 15 years, because some of the girls too, but particularly our boys, are dying every day. Every day, there's something else going on with our young boys being taken away from us. Our older males too, but I am actually more concerned about the youth. We can't afford it to take 15 years like we did with the tasers. Tasers generally do not kill, as the guns don't kill either. It's the person behind them. So I believe whatever it takes, because money is there. It's about priority. If Black Lives Matter,
Yes.
to our police, to our representatives, to the boards, to the chaplains, the faith base, like they do to the mothers. We can't afford to wait 15 years. I don't care about all of the verbiage and the boards talking and the paperwork and all of these reasons and excuses. When it is a priority to those people at the top, things happen. Things happen. It's that it is not a priority to those that are in power. And I'm not just talking about the police, because there is a hierarchy. I'm talking all of those that are in power. We are getting tired. We're getting tired. And you say, well, he did this, he did that, he had a little knife, he had a big knife, he didn't have a knife at all, he ran. And the bottom line is, there are more of our youth being killed. What are we going to do besides talk and say it's getting a little better, but it's going to take 15 years? That's just unacceptable.
Chief?
If I could respond. One of the things the community can do is affirm the efforts of leading police departments like Miami Beach, Miami-Dade, and Miami who are plunging into this technology. We're making the effort. There's a whole lot of police departments that are sitting on their hands. And applaud the decision makers among our electeds who are expending significant dollars to do this. And then as we work through these issues of policy, and I'm sorry, there are going to be court decisions about this stuff. This is stuff that's going to be litigated, and unfortunately, as anxious as we are, could take years. But the one thing I would ask of influential boards like this is your affirmation and support, because there's going to be bumps in the road and rocky moments ahead as we try and discern what's the best way to implement this technology properly. So I appreciate the impatience. I can tell you, I think Miami Beach is doing this smartly. As an example, you can't just put 30 cops in a room and train them. We've learned that the training for an officer to use this software is 4 or 5 cops at a time for 4 to 5 hours. Then they go out and they make mistakes, and you got to bring them back 2 weeks later and train them again. So a simple thing like teaching the cops to use the software properly requires time. So I appreciate the impatience, but the one thing I would ask is that when our taxpayers and our voters and our electeds take us down this path, as, again, Miami-Dade, Miami, and Miami Beach have done, we need your support. And we're going to make mistakes. That's the other thing that's going to happen is as we figure this all out, I'm already in my second version of our policy. And the policies may change over time as we learn and make mistakes, that we get sort of an understanding that we're trying, because we are trying.
This board has worked with Miami Beach Police, so I must say that we have worked directly with you all even before you. But to say, but we make mistakes. Make a mistake, I understand. I make mistakes. We all make mistakes. But we cannot afford a mistake like, I made a mistake, I shot him, I killed him. That is not what
I'm referring to mistakes as we integrate new technology.
All right,
That's not a mistake.
But let me clarify one thing, and then I'm going to turn it over twice over. The one thing I learned about attending that conference, and that was the PERF conference, and the word keeps popping up, it's the Police Executive Research Forum, is that I learned that being a police officer is a professional career. But I also learned that many police departments didn't necessarily always hire professional people. So where we have some of the issues, and you know, I'm gonna ask the Lord to bless both the chiefs that we have here. Where we have some of the issues is that we need to work on our caliber of officers. I know Chief Oates has instituted a new policy for Miami Beach, and we do applaud you on this, where in order to be a Miami Beach police officer, you need to have graduated from college or served and been honorably discharged in the military. That means, unlike the state of Florida, which says you need to be 19 years old and have a GED, now let's let that sit in for a second. We're going to expect that you will have some level of maturity, some level of knowledge, and some level of trainable accountability. So what I heard here was I'll say it, we ain't waiting 15 years.
We don't want to wait for not even 1 hour.
But what I heard from both at Perth and what I heard from Chief Oates is that he ain't gonna be around 15 years anyway. He don't want to wait 15 years. Where we all need to pull together is there are 32 different organizations and police agencies here. I've got 2 on the dais that are rolling this out. It looks like there are a whole lot of people who are left to join us. And to the point that Ms. Dames made, that's because those particular municipal governments haven't committed to addressing this problem. So that's kind of where we are. Now, with that said, thank you for getting it started. Minister Muhammad, I'm going to come right down the line because everybody, I got you. I'm coming right down the line, Mr. Muhammad.
Yes, sir. Sitting here as a student of scriptures, I think that there's a few things that must be brought. There is a scripture reference in the Bible that says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and spiritual wickedness in high places.
Hallelujah.
There is a Quranic verse that says, corruption has appeared in the land and the sea for what man's hands have wrought. There's another scriptural reference that says, be ye not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Amen.
And we respect that those would have a certain level of college degrees and completed even a master's degrees, that's